to the final back to school bonus episode. We are almost out of September. October is just a stone's throw away. I could not be happier because I really could use this season to just end. That would be lovely. But it is going to end soon, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to interviews and producing more shows for you. But in the meantime, for this final episode of the back to school season, I am going to the archives to episode 10. Episode 10 is really cool because it's Zelda themed. And what better way to lead into October 3rd's Zelda release than this episode? I think it's really going to work out well, and I think it's really good. The first half of the episode features Andrew Craig, who's been on the show a number of times. He shares a really touching story about how the Legend of Zelda affected his life in a very positive way. And then we talk to Greg of the Level Zero podcast. Honestly, I just kind of want to leave that one alone. I just want to let you guys listen to it, enjoy it, and laugh along with it. I remember laughing a lot when he told me this story last year, so I hope you do too. And before we kick things off, I'd like to thank my wonderful patrons, Tim Knowles from The Elitist, Seth Sergil of the All In podcast, Ryan Payne of Gamers Week podcast, Pete Harney, Dan of Retro Logic, Julian of the Nerds Without Pants podcast, and Michael, aka BT Goebbels. All of these wonderful people support me on Patreon, and you can too by going to patreon.com/agamerlooksit4040. Thanks very much for the support. Thank you for listening and supporting during this crazy time of year for me. And enjoy this double shot of awesome episodes. Let's jump into it. Any games in particular that really just struck you during that time?
Well, the one that I'm kind of here to talk about.
Go for it.
Which is The Legend of Zelda.
Ah, yes. The Legend of Zelda.
A lot of people feel like they have a personal connection to this game, and that's completely understandable because it has sort of echoed generationally since then. But this game is a game that changed my life. It rewired my brain, and so much of who I am now is attributed to my experience with Zelda.
Wow, that's cool. Zelda is such a classic, timeless classic. What about it do you think really impacted you?
Well, first of all, I first found it because I was at a sleepover at my buddy's house on his birthday, and I can tell you the date of this sleepover because that night the Call of the Simpsons episode of The Simpsons aired for the first time.
Nice.
So, like, I can lock this into February 18th of 1990.
Wow.
Everyone else went to bed early. I've always been a night owl, and so I was going through his NES collection and found that gold cart. And that thing stands out. It doesn't matter how many great games you have. If you have a bunch of NES games lined up, that one's going to stand out for obvious reasons. And so I popped it in, and I played for about 20 minutes before his mom caught me and made me go to bed with everybody else. So my birthday was about 2 months later, and I made getting Zelda the goal. All my birthday money, I did extra chores to earn extra money so that I could save up the cash necessary to get it. And the day came, I went and got it from the Target down the street from my house, came home, put it in, played for about an hour and a half, and then had the crushing realization of what that game really is.
Oh no.
It is not a game designed for 8-year-olds.
No, it certainly is not. Oh no.
And I went to bed in tears. Like, I am the kind of person, I've always been the kind of person who really considers every move that I make. And I realized that I had just lost months of my life, which when you're 8 years old is a huge span of time.
Forever, yeah. Because that was the game you were going to get. And you said you paid for that game. That was your game.
Well, and you, when you were a kid back then, you got 2 games a year. You got one for your birthday and one for Christmas.
Right. Yeah. That was the one you got. Oh no.
That was the one I got. And now I've got, 8 months until the next one. This is the world I'm living in. So I went to bed in tears and then woke up the next day with a new resolve. And this is where the game changed the way that I think forever. I went and got graph paper and spent the next 3 months mapping out the entire game.
Oh my God.
Every screen, testing every bush, figuring out what every enemy was weak to and what the best strategies were, and put together about a 60-page tome.
That is incredible. That's amazing. You were writing player's guides before there were player's guides. Well, there were, but you were writing your own player's guides.
Well, and more than anything, I was doing the two things that I've since spent my adult life doing professionally, which is discovering systems and problem solving and drawing.
That's amazing. That is amazing. It's almost like, and this has come up with other people before in this kind of series, how games were edutainment without even trying. You learn skills, like you learn genuine life skills through that experience of mapping that out without even thinking about it.
And even now in my professional life, I've spent most of my adult life being an artist who is expected to solve problems and adapt based on the struggles that are put in front of us. And that's all of those skill sets and the love of doing that came from Zelda.
That's incredible. What an incredible accomplishment, really. And with this, were you able to complete the game? How far did you get? I'm assuming you finished it.
Oh, I finished it multiple times.
Right.
And then it became sort of a life goal to every time a Zelda comes out, I have to get it, I have to beat it, I have to 100% it. Have to.
Wow. Even, dare I say, Breath of the Wild.
100% of it.
Wow, congratulations, man. That's not a game. Wow.
Yeah, that's not an easy one to do. That took a long time, but
yeah,
that's what I do.
That's awesome, man. I'm gonna ask you the dumb question because I really am genuinely interested. What would you say your favorite? We'll start with favorite. What do you think your favorite Zelda game is?
Link's Awakening. By far.
It is. That's so interesting. I just recently recorded a podcast with Mike Alberton from the Overblood group on his show about Link's Awakening. And I played it for the first time 6 months ago. And I love that game. That's a top 3 for me.
Did you play the remake or did you play the original?
The original, the DX. So the Game Boy Color edition. Yeah, so I did not play the remake. I was like, nope, I want to play this as close to the original as possible. I like this.
The original one's the right one to play. It is fantastic. It's beautiful. It's melancholy. It's everything that Zelda does right.
Yeah, it's dark and it's interesting and it's sad but joyful. It's really just a gorgeous little game, and it's definitely it's a top 3 for me. Top 3 and 5, depending on the day. Yeah, but yeah.
I still have my original Game Boy, and on the front of the Game Boy is a series of arrows drawn on in Sharpie, and those are the directions through the final dungeon.
That is insane.
They will forever be there. They are forever marked as part of the history of that Game Boy.
That is awesome. I want to talk a little bit about Link's Awakening. What about it? Did you play it, I guess, as, of the time, clearly, because you were drawing arrows on your Game Boy. What about it still resonates with you as an adult?
Well, like I said, I think that it takes what makes Zelda so great, which is a formula and the sense of discovery, the sense of adventure behind it. But I think that it frames it in a unique place in that it's not about the struggle against a villain, but sort of a struggle against the environment that you're in. Mm-hmm. And I really love the idea that it is, like you said earlier, it's sad but also hopeful. And I think it has just a banging soundtrack.
Yeah, soundtrack's phenomenal. It's so good. Every song.
Yeah, especially the staff roll at the end is just a great take on the actual like Hyrule theme, the Zelda theme, the one that everybody knows. years later, I worked as part of the crew responsible for Symphony of the Goddesses, the concert series based on Legend of Zelda,
Oh wow, yeah.
with an orchestra, and
Uh-huh.
that was my big push. Like my big thing every time I got with those guys was just, guys, we have to get Link's Awakening in here. This has to be part of it.
Yeah.
And so it was a big
Wow.
triumph when we finally made that happen because it is just so good.
That's surprising how underappreciated that game is. Even for me, I've played, I would say, most of the Zeldas, not all of them, and there are some big holes in that catalog. But Link's Awakening was one I just kind of, there's the Game Boy one. I didn't really think much about it, and then
Well,
fast forward,
it's
yeah, six, yeah.
it's sandwiched between A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time,
I know.
which tends to be the argument with Zelda fans is either one of those is the greatest Zelda game ever, or the other one is. You know, it's everyone picks one of those two as their favorite, and so when you're a little Game
Right.
Boy game that's sandwiched between the two most defining games in the series, it's
Yeah.
easy to be overlooked.
And also, those two games are capital I important, right? It more some. I think sometimes depend like for Ocarina, I think it's more important than it is actually good. I think it's fine.
Yeah. I think it's a very good game, especially for when it came out, but
Yeah.
it doesn't hold up the way that like Wind Waker does.
Right, which is a big hole in my catalog. I need to play Wind Waker.
Oh, you
No,
absolutely do.
I know
That one I pushed back on hard. I didn't get a GameCube near the end of generation because the only reason I really had to get one was Zelda, and they didn't give me the Zelda they promised. They gave me cartoons.
Right,
And so I didn't bother. And a friend of
Interesting.
mine finally said, buy a GameCube, buy a Wind Waker, play it. If you do not like it, I will reimburse you for the cost of both.
Wow, that's a no brainer on your part. You have to.
Yeah. And I got about an hour and a half in and just went, all right, looks like I own a GameCube now.
I paid for it. Oh,
and now
man.
it's probably one of my favorite of the 3D Zeldas.
Yeah, that's the I had to do that one, and Majora's Mask is the other one. I just never bothered.
Oh, you've got such big holes in your Zelda
I said they're big.
experience.
I said they're big. I didn't say they were tiny. So I gotta fill those at some point. Yeah. So what would you say? So I think that's an excellent choice, and I actually know other people who would agree 100% with you. It's amazing how deep the fandom of Link's Awakening is, especially from people who played it of its time, contemporaneously. It's amazing how passionate people are about that game that a lot of people don't really think about when you think about the legends of the Legend of Zelda. It's a really the people who love that game adore it. That's what's interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hate to say it this way because it's not really accurate, but it's kind of the Terminator 2 of the Zelda series in that it's kind of quiet and insulated in its own thing, where the other ones were all sort of these big bombastic things. Two, when you really think about it, it's those three people together for the entire thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't feel as epic and giant, even though the action's huge.
Yeah, there's a lot of little personal stories in two. Yeah, there's a lot of time with Arnold and a kid.
Well, and where it doesn't feel like the world is on your shoulders as a character. It's just sort of this nice little side thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought it was really it's a very interesting game. Again, I feel I just talked about it like 3 weeks ago with games my mom found, but man, no, it's a great game. It's a good play. Now, if you had to pick a number 2 on this list, we'll kind of do it this way. What would you say that number 2 would be?
That one's a much harder question to answer. Especially because when we get into the number 2s, I mean, my tendency is to lean towards Wind Waker, even more than Breath of the Wild, just because I think that there's so much charm in Wind Waker.
Okay.
But I'm also tempted by things like Twilight Princess, but part of me is also wondering if I'm skewed by, professional experience with that.
Oh, how so?
The group that did Symphony of the Goddesses, we also recorded a completely orchestrated version of the Twilight Princess soundtrack.
Okay.
So it's a 3-disc monster that's out there somewhere.
Whoa. Okay. Wow.
That is all orchestra.
It's probably gorgeous. Wow.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's wonderful. But, that's less about the game and more about personal memories that are sort of tangentially related to the game.
Sure, for sure.
So yeah, I would tend to lean towards Wind Waker.
Gotcha. Okay. Wind Waker again is one of those I need to get my hands around. My number one for me, and this makes me sound basic, but I'll just do it, is Breath of the Wild. I think for me, it's. I know some people say it's not a Zelda game, quote unquote. But
it absolutely is.
It is, and I love the fact that it tosses aside a lot of the Zelda conventions, and it just makes exploration so fun. As everyone knows, the source of the Legend of Zelda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was Miyamoto wanted to simulate what it was like to kind of roam the countryside and just go on these wandering adventures. And I think Breath of the Wild is the culmination of that dream. That's what
absolutely.
That game...
And the things that they changed with Breath of the Wild that weren't constants in the Zelda series before that were not the things that define them.
Yeah, great. Yes, excellent point.
The games are defined by their sense of adventure and exploration and figuring out the world that you live in. And that's Breath of the Wild. Like, that's what it is in its purest form.
Yeah, and I even like the breakable weapons. I like them. I think they're kind of great. I love the concept.
They drove me crazy at the beginning.
At the beginning, it's tough, right? Because once you lean into it, though, for me, I'm like, oh, great. I don't have to hold on to this. It was very freeing. Like, I don't need to hoard everything like I do in every other game for that slim chance I'll use it. The designer said, here's some toys. Play with the toys. They will break. We'll give you more toys. It's okay. You have plenty of toys. And
that's exactly what drove me crazy about it.
See, interesting.
As a completionist,
yeah,
I have to keep, like, I'm that person who plays through the entirety of a Kingdom Hearts game on the most difficult setting and never uses any of my potions or ethers or anything.
Interesting. See, go ahead. Sorry.
You have to sort of retrain yourself not to do that with Breath of the Wild. But once I got over that initial hurdle, it was a blast.
Oh, there's nothing more joyous. I don't say nothing, but there are a few things in games more joyous than picking a point on the horizon, saying, I want to go there, and realizing that if there's nothing interesting over there, something interesting is going to happen on the way. Along that route,
absolutely.
there is something cool or interesting or neat or discoverable or collectible. That is just so priceless. And I cannot play a game now. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And the feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff and suddenly a dragon flies by.
And
you're just like, what the hell is that? And then finding out later, I need parts of that to upgrade some of my gear. Well, now I'm going to go hunt dragons.
Yep. That's what I'm going to do now. And there's no way of knowing what those things are. Like, that's the beauty. There's no codec. Or there is, but there's like, at the beginning anyway, there's no codex. There's no this is a dragon that's in this area. Here it is. Deduce what you will.
And discovering systems in that game where you go like, okay, so I noticed that when I chop down a tree, the log falls a certain way. I wonder if I chopped down a tree next to a rock and then stood on the edge of a log and dropped something on the other end of that log, would it shoot me in the air? And realizing that, it does. The physics are all there. It's so just... for somebody who loves science and engineering, that game turned into like a joy of just me going, I wonder if.
It's an amazing sandbox. It's what sandbox games need to be, because again, it's this beautiful large open world that has lots of interesting things to do, and that's built around fun exploration and play. And it feels so good in your hands, and I don't know, man. I think I adore that game so much. And maybe again because it's the most recent one I've played and I've spent a lot of time in it, but man alive, it was such a revelation to me. So, and my number two,
I spent a lot of time in it twice.
I don't see. I'm not a completionist. That's a world I don't live in. So I find that kind of thing fascinating. And
I did it on Wii U and then realized, well, I'm going to have to do all this again on the Switch. Screw it. I'm going to get a Switch. I went and got a Switch and did it all again. And what was your number 2?
Oh, my number 2 would be Link to the Past. It's just a good top-down, the Link to the Past. And then my number 3, if it's not Link Awakening, it would be Link Between Worlds, because I love that game. And I think if you think Link to the Past is your favorite game, then Link Between Worlds should be your second, because it's just Link to the Past with a slightly better mechanic for going between light and dark worlds. So,
and a slightly cuter art style.
Exactly. I am a sucker for cute. So that's good for me. But yeah, Link's Awakening can really be in that 3 slot again, depending on the day. So yeah. What about you for number 3?
Probably either Breath of the Wild or the original.
And the original, you have so much connection to. So that's
yeah.
Not
well,
easy.
And the original is still a thing that I pull out every once in a while, just because I know it so implicitly at this point. Like when you're 8 years old, you're at that perfect age where you just soak everything up, and so I just remember everything because I lived it for 6 months. And when you're 8 and you live something for 6 months, that's just living rent free in your head for the rest of your life.
Let's go back to the NES real quick. Obviously, Zelda was a huge formative game for you. Was there anything else that really connected with you during that time?
So many. I don't know if it's clear or not, but I'm kind of game culture is kind of my thing.
That's fair.
I've got, what am I up to? I think I hit 230 platinums on the PSN last night.
Man. I don't. Good for you. That's awesome. That's awesome.
There are a few people in the Overblood group that are trying to catch me.
Wow, are you?
But I think I'm still reigning champ.
Your tops.
I think so. As far as I know.
That's pretty great. I am the complete opposite. I don't even know where the achievements are. I just kind of like. Yeah, I don't know. I play them until I'm done, and then I'm done. I don't know. That's just how my brain works. But I think that's amazing though. People who 100% things and go through that. Go for that huge challenge is awesome. That's just.
But
so
cool. much of that was born in Zelda. That mindset, that mentality. I have to figure this whole thing out, understand the systems, and do everything.
It's almost
from Zelda.
It seems like it's almost like solving a puzzle, right? I need to. Yeah,
well, and that's what I deeply appreciate about it.
Right.
Is Zelda? Zelda was the game that taught me that I loved puzzles, and I loved being challenged, and that a challenge wasn't something to fear, but something to help you learn and grow.
Yeah, something to embrace. Interesting. That's really cool.
Professionally now, a big part of my job is saying, everyone thinks this is impossible. Find a way to make it work.
There you go.
And that mindset, that mentality that allows me to do that came from Zelda.
If you live in the Central Texas area, Classic Game Fest is where you should be on July 24th and 25th. CGF is the largest retro gaming convention in Texas, and it's full of things to do, see, and explore. If you're a collector, Classic Game Fest offers an entire floor of vendors selling everything from retro games, consoles, original artwork, crafts, and general merchandise. And after your shopping spree, head upstairs to check out video game cover bands, an amazing arcade, and panels. This year, John St. John, the voice of Duke Nukem, will be in attendance, which promises to be amazing. And I'll be there, gathering video game stories for this very podcast and doing social media for The Austronaut, which is the site in which I write for. And so much more. I can't fit it in this spot, so go to ClassicGameFest.com for tickets, scheduling, and access to all of their social media. Classic Game Fest at the Palmer Event Center in Austin, Texas, July 24th and 25th. Hope to see you there. Next up, we have a story that's a little more lighthearted. It's a little more
on the silly side, which is good. Those are the kind of the balancing act I want to do on these sort of shows. Meet Greg. He's the host of the Level Zero podcast. It's a really interesting show where he does these very cool deep dives into franchises and games. He recently spent 4 episodes on Zelda, which is actually very fascinating. It's well produced. It's got lots of music and variety. Really very cool show. You should certainly check it out if you have not had the chance to yet. But Greg reached out to me with, just like Andrew, I got some stories for you. So we, as of this recording, we met last week virtually, and he told me some of those stories. Really great stuff. More stuff you'll hear later on in the 16-bit section of episodes. But he told one story in particular that really caught me and really, really made me laugh and made me think and really honestly feel about how it was playing games back in the mid-'80s for me, and for him probably the early 90s. So I don't want to spoil anything, all right? Just think about this. When listening to this episode, try not to skip ahead. That's all I'm going to say. Let's check it out.
I am about to tell you, Bill, my most embarrassing moment in all of video gaming, and it has directly to do with Link to the Past.
Oh, I cannot wait.
I've got to tell you, because I was telling you, I'm 6 or 7 years old when I'm playing this game.
Go for it.
I've got friends that are also into video games, but nobody seems to have Link to the Past or has gotten as far as I had, past that hump into the dark world. And I was further than my older brother's save file, and so I was pretty left on my own at that point, trying to progress through this game and figure things out. And what is insane about Link to the Past is how well it is how clear it is with what you need to do next. And it's insane, like, without reading any dialogue whatsoever, you can just look at the map and say, I got to go over there. Okay. And then it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like, so I'll just do these in order. Like, this is pretty simple. You just navigate the map. But there was a point in the game that was absolutely not intuitive. And this leads up to my problem of being a 6-year-old kid who did not want to read anything in a video game. I didn't want to read anything at school. I didn't really want to read anything in a video game. Link to the Past hands you a lot of dialogue. But it's not important to read because you know what to do from the gameplay. So I skipped everything as fast as I could.
Oh.
The second dialogue came up, next,
Oh,
for
no.
everything in that game. Everything.
Oh, no.
And it was fine. Like, I was progressing further than my friends, further than my older brother. I got this until I got to a point where I got stuck. And I had no help. And I had no internet. And I had no walkthroughs. And I had no clue what to do next. Until I finally found some guy that is standing in a stump in a clearing, and he hands you a shovel.
Right.
I don't know what he said.
Yes.
He said something, but he handed me a shovel. And I knew up to that point that you use the items to progress in the game. So
Right.
I can dig. And I realized that I have skipped over the instructions of what I am supposed to do with the shovel.
Oh,
And I'm pretty sure I cannot get to the next dungeon until I figure this out.
Oh,
And I was stuck. Very, very stuck in that game. Nobody to help me and nothing to do.
On an island.
On an island, all alone, with no choice but to shovel the ground everywhere. Everywhere. So I would spend 45 minutes just shoveling everything. The whole map, as much as I could. Because surely there's something to do with the shovel. And nothing. And I got more frustrated and more frustrated and more frustrated. And eventually, it led to a big meltdown, which you've got a 4-year-old. You know what it's like when a 4-year-old is melting down at a video game. It's not fun. As a parent, it's kind of like, why am I letting this kid even play this game? This is not good. I, had a big temper tantrum. And my mom, being as wonderful as she was, she said, what can I do? And I said, I honestly don't know. I don't know what to do next. I have no idea. But I do know in this box, it says on here that you can call this number. Yes. Yes. I somehow, some way managed to get my mom to call that number and help me get past this point in the game.
Oh, boy.
So she dialed the number and handed me the phone. And I said, I can't. I have no idea. I can't talk to this. I can't talk on the phone. I'm a 6-year-old. I have no idea.
Right.
So I refused, and it was ringing and ringing, and then finally, hello, hello, hello. And my mom had to talk to the person. My son is stuck in this game. He doesn't know where to go. And slowly, I was able to explain to my mom where I was in the game, what I was doing, what do I do with this dumb shovel? I have no idea. And she would slowly relay it to the guy on the phone. Meanwhile, collecting minutes every single,
Oh my gosh.
collecting dollars every minute on the phone call, right? And then finally she said, okay, well, you're talking to him now. Just you talk to him. And I said, no. So my mom had to keep talking through, going back and forth, talking through me. Finally, she was able to relay. The guy says on the phone that you're supposed to go into the light world. And you're supposed to use the shovel to look for a flute. And I was like, that makes sense because this is where the guy was that was blowing the flute. And finally, with the guy on the phone, I was able to find the flute, which just looks like a blue ocarina. And that was what I needed to progress in the game.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. You're one of the only people I know who actually used the helpline.
I had no choice.
You had no choice. Use that or restart, and do it all again and actually read what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
Now, do you know how much that cost? I'm obviously as a kid you didn't, but
that is a good question. I never followed up to ask what the bill was.
No, you're probably too embarrassed.
Too afraid. Yeah. I have since asked my mom about it later, and she honestly doesn't remember. There were 4 of us kids. She was like, yeah, I guess I did do that. And I'm like, yeah, but you call the hotline because I forced you to.
Yeah. What else was she going to do? She had a panicking child. Yeah, that's amazing. How funny. Then first person I've ever heard who actually called the line. Do you remember offhand how long that call was? Just kind of roundabout?
I mean, it had to have been at least 15 minutes to try to communicate where I was and get to where. And I'm pretty sure looking back that really is a sticking point. Like the guy that gives you the shovel does kind of tell you hey, it's in a clearing with animals. And it's pretty clear if you just read the text what you're supposed to do. But I also think that people got stuck because once you get that flute, you have to play it in front of the little statue in the village. And then you get a goose that then can fly you around the map. Right. And that's kind of like the fast travel. And the way that the guy was able to relay what I was supposed to do led me to believe that surely other people got stuck here. Yeah, this is probably not an uncommon choke point for a lot of kids in man. So you figure what $3 a minute? How much did they charge for that dang thing? Man, that was probably $50. That's crazy. How funny. I guess it could have been. Yeah, if it was a couple dollars a minute, that got to be a couple bucks a minute, 15 minutes. Figure out 40-something bucks. Embarrassing. Oh, that's amazing. That's what. Honestly, good for your mom for realizing. My son needs this, and this is this thing he loves. It's gonna be $50 to get me through this, but you know what? He's worth it, right? And that's awesome. Really, kudos to your mom for going that mile. For real, and, a real hero. Yeah, seriously, for sure. And man, next time. Read the captions. Read everything. You would think that Did you learn? Have I learned my lesson? I will now read every dialogue box that comes up in a video game. Bill, the answer is no. I absolutely hate reading dialogue in video games to this day. In my 30s, I honestly don't, even when it's a spoken with audio. Mm-hmm. But it is a dialogue-driven game, like say Mass Effect or Dragon Age. I don't like it. It's too much. It's too much text. Get that out of here. I just want to play. I want the game to tell me what to do just by being intuitive.
Yeah, no, and you're right, and that's the kind of the end game for a lot of games that over explain. Just that's kind of masking poor design, right? So,
Right.
Wow, thanks for sharing that story, man. That's really funny. That's awesome. Cautionary tale for all kids who are out there.
And that does it for this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40, the final back to school episode. It is done. It is over. Thank you so much for sticking with the show and reliving some of these memories while I've been in this situation. It's a yearly thing. Who knows what'll happen next year, but for now, it's over and done with. So if you were sick of the reruns, be sick no more. Next week begins the Legend of Zelda series, and I could not be more excited to share these episodes with you. It's going to be an amazing series that might take us to the end of the year. I'm really thinking like end November is when we'll be done with this and ready to move on. We're going to have lots of conversations, lots of memories, special episodes. It's going to be pretty cool. So if you dig The Legend of Zelda, this podcast should be your home for at least the next couple of months. This is the largest project I've ever attempted with any podcast I've put together. So thank you again for being a part of the show. Twitter if you need me. Email if you need me. All the stuff's everywhere. I'm not going to repeat it. Thank you again for hanging with the show and sticking with it and for being friends and fans. And I'll catch you next time on A Gamer Looks at 40.